Welcome back, Fantasy Fiction Fanatics. It's great to see you again, and I hope you're doing well. Today's class is going to be on the next set of chapters for Homeland, chapters 5 through 10. So hopefully you've been enjoying the book so far. Hopefully you've enjoyed our first discussion and are ready to jump into this next discussion. I felt like we had so much from last time that I really just wanted to kind of get into a little bit more of this book right away and discuss it with you and read some more about it again. Since I am rereading it, there's a lot of things that I don't always remember until I'm doing my reread to discuss it with you guys and stuff. And especially since this is a book I don't remember as well as some of the other books that we've covered, I'm really enjoying rediscovering it with you guys. So hopefully you guys are enjoying it as well. Let's go ahead and jump into our recap as always. We do have several things that go on in this set of chapters, so let's get right to it. We start off at the very beginning of this set of chapters with Vierna taking care of Drizzt and raising him. She's teaching him how to, use his magic. They're teaching him how, the world works for them, the way that he's supposed to be inferior to women, about the surface dwellers, all that kind of stuff. So she's the one that's in charge of teaching him and basically taking care of him. When he turns 16, he becomes an official second boy of House Drizzt and is no longer a servant or a lower class individual. He is now officially part of the family at 16. And this is where he gets to choose, or not really to choose, Malice gets to choose whether he's going to go to be a sorcerer or if he's going to study weapons. And Zach convinces Malice to make it so he is a weapons person, where he studies weapons. And Zach then, from there on, takes over Drizzt's training and is training him very hard to become really good at weapons. In the meantime, we have we see Alton and what he's trying to do. He's been at this for 16 years, and he ends up summoning his mom in order to tries to summon his mom's spirit. There we go. To try and get an answer of which house took them down, because he still wants his revenge. So from there, he ends up almost getting himself and Mazaj killed because, he really wasn't supposed to be summoning the spirit of someone in the abyss with Lolith, and ticks off the handmaiden, who is like, no, you're not going to be calling on spirits of the dead here, and ends up, having to set himself almost on fire to protect himself from the spiders. And then at 19 years old, Malice comes to Drizzt, so Drizzt is 19, and she witnesses his abilities with the weapons and is very impressed on his progress on how good of a weapons person he has become. So he's very happy about that. And Drizzt is then called, I think it's like the next night or like a night nearby of that time, to witness one house that's trying to murder and take over this other house in the middle of the night. And so he is called to witness this and to see it happening, which he's very confused about and is not very happy about seeing it. So he doesn't totally understand. In the meantime of this, Alton's true identity is discovered by the matron of House Hunnet, and he finds out that really the faceless one was Gelrus, who was the matron's son and Mazaj's brother, and now has to be kind of in line with House Hunnet. So he's been indoctrinated, I guess you'd say, into House Hunnet as the disguise of Gelrus, and the matron now knows. And then Drizzt and his family are called to witness the punishment for the house that did not make it for destroying the other house. So the attacking house did not succeed, and now they're getting punishment. And he is just absolutely, Drizzt is just absolutely horrified by how this is handled and how they are literally murdered and destroyed. So Drizzt's family, the matron Malice and Briza, have both witnessed his reaction to the punishment and can tell that he is just horrified by it. And so they've decided that they are going to toughen him up a bit by forcing him to kill his first kill, and to kill another Dro, quote unquote Dro, because it wasn't actually a Dro, they just made it look like that to him. And are now going to be sending him off to university. They're not going to wait anymore. Malice is like, off he goes. We're getting him away from Zach. So we've got quite a few things, like I said, happening in these sections. We've got, some new character building. So at the first section, we didn't really talk about characters much because we're still getting to know them. We're still getting to interact with them. And in this one, we've got some more building and some more depth to some of these characters to actually see what's going on. So the first one let's talk about is Drizzt. So obviously this is about Drizzt, this series. So he is going to be the most important person to talk about just in general. But also, he's got a lot going on for him in this sections as he's growing up, as he's learning new things, as we're getting a sense of who he is and how he's interacting with those around him. And we notice that there are differences about him. So that's the biggest thing right now, is that his differences from the other Dro around him is very noticeable. He is not bloodthirsty. He is not malicious. He has values when it comes to treating other people, especially Dro. He believes in being kind and courteous and respectful to other people. He smiles, he laughs, and has unashamed pride in himself. Like, he doesn't get the concept of being inferior. He's very prideful of the things that he succeeds in and the way that he progresses. He doesn't really understand what it means to be inferior to women. Like, it took him a long time to not look at people in their faces, especially women. And then it took him a while to then realize that he could do that again. But he really doesn't understand the concept of being inferior to somebody else. He's like, okay, we should just all be equal here. So that's something that is definitely noticeable for him. He doesn't really have malicious motivations. So again, he's not malicious, but also his motivations have no ulterior motives to them. He's just, living his life and doesn't really care about, what other Dro care about, at least at this point, like, building up rank or trying to, like, get in with, like, the matron Malice, and doesn't really care about, progressing his status. He's just really chill, I guess you could say at this point. He just is enjoying life and wishing that he could just enjoy life more by not having his siblings whipping him and yelling at him and telling him all these things about being inferior. And even he was revolted and disgusted by how the houses are attacking each other, how they're destroyed when they don't succeed, like so maliciously and horribly. He really doesn't understand the concept of why another house would want to attack another house. He's just very confused by Dro society. He doesn't really understand it because it doesn't make sense to him. So in those ways, he is very, very different from the other Dro, because Dros tend to naturally have these instincts, or are at least they're more easy to, after being treated horribly, and to see how it is to conform to those ways if they weren't naturally predisposed to them. So at this point, he's much more of a fighter of this Dro society. He's much more in tune with what he personally thinks is right and how he feels like the world should be. And so the Dro world and how the actuality of the reality of things is very much confusing to him and putting pressure on him to stand down and to conform. And he's like, no, I really don't feel like this makes any sense. So I give him props for really sticking to what he thinks should be the right way of doing things. He is a strong fighter, so that's another thing we've really established at this point, is that he learns very, very quickly. He's excellent with weapons, and he is top-notch for his age, especially for his age. Something that Drizzt doesn't know, but that we know, is that he's Zach's son. And we're going to talk about this a little bit later in this class here, but it's very, very important that we understand that he's Zach's son, and the fact that we've seen some differences that we even mentioned in our Nitty Gritty of last time, that there's some things going on with Zach that's different than everybody else around as well. So we're going to have that connection, even if Drizzt doesn't know of that connection. We do know that we've established that Drizzt hates the surface dwellers at this point, and that has been conditioned into him. I mean, he didn't naturally have this hatred. He doesn't really have a natural hatred for anybody or anything. But when he was growing up, under 5 years old, he was whipped and told that his problems are the surface dwellers and that you should hate the surface dwellers and all this stuff. So that is a conditioned hate. So we understand where that conditioning came from and where that hatred comes from. And it is not a natural one at all. And so kind of going off of this riff of his tough childhood and conditioning to hate, despite this tough childhood and despite being whipped and berated and told that he's inferior, he has this spark of life to him. He's got this light that is obvious to those that, interact with him more than just a little bit of time. It really shows in his eyes, it shows in his smile, it shows in his pride. Especially when he became the second boy of the house, he was so prideful and so light with joy when he was talking to Zach and saying oh, I made it, I'm now a second boy, and he wasn't supposed to speak. And he did not see any reason why he shouldn't speak, and was just I have got it going on. He had this light and this joyfulness to him with that pride that is not seen in anybody else. And then he is having, Drow ideals thrust upon him at this point. So now that we are toward the end of this section, we kind of see that these Drow ideals and these ideas are now being finally at the time that he's at an age that they are being thrust upon him. They are literally forcing him to try and be one way versus another way. We see that with how the girls make it so he must kill somebody and to take that innocence from him. We see it in how they are berating him and whipping him when he doesn't treat them right in their respect. We see that in the way, they're very upset that he was not more happy about the destruction of the other house, where they don't understand his disbelief and his horror, and so they're we're gonna beat that out of you. We're gonna make it so you will like this. So his female family, not Virna, but the rest of his female family is really thrusting this Drow society onto him, and we will have to see in the future how that turns out for his personality. But right now we really are seeing it being kind of thrust in front of him, forced onto him, forcing him to do things. So it really is just not great for him right now in those terms of trying to break his spirit of defiance against the Drow society. And talking about Drizzt and all this stuff is very important because we are really setting up Drizzt's personality. We are setting up the differences that he has from everybody else. We're setting up the ideals that he has, at least at this time, or setting up who this person is for that way later when we've got new things happening and we've got new situations that he's going to be handling, we will understand what his starting point was, and we're going to understand where his choices come from or don't come from. So really, really important as a character who is going to be a main character and going to be an important character, that we understand a base for us to understand later decisions and later events and how they affect things, as well as to have our own relationship with this character as well as a reader. So hopefully you're interested in Drizzt. I think it's a very good start to Drizzt. Obviously, we are setting him up to be much more of a good person and a good character versus all the horrible characters that are around him. Horrible meaning like bad people, like Matron Malice, you know. So it's really starting us off to like see how he is different, to start us off as being somebody who doesn't fit in, being an outlier, being someone who pushes back. So we're going to see how that affects things later, especially as he goes to academy, and possibly, depending on how that story takes us, it might be to when he's even older than that. But we will just have to find out from here. Let me know what you think of Drizzt. Do you like Drizzt so far? Do you think he's interesting? Are you excited about him? Or do you wish he was somebody who was more on the pro-Dro culture? I'd love to know. Yeah, just love to hear your thoughts on him. Next, let's talk about Drizzt's caretakers, because he has had 2 different caretakers throughout his life. He's had Vierna when he was really young, and now he's had Zach now as a teenager, someone who is like a role model, a teacher, a caregiver. Though, you know, if we're going to talk about, you know, care, it's not really that they're giving care, but that's the term I can think of as like what their role was supposed to be. The person that's supposed to look after them and teach them and give them their, you know, food and all that stuff. So, caretaker or caregiver is a little bit of a loose term just for a concept, not necessarily actuality. But they are important people in Drizzt's life because they are his role models and they are ones teaching him about how life is supposed to be. So it's important for us, I think, to kind of cover who they are and how they've affected Drizzt. Because, you know, we're having a nature and nurture kind of situation here, is that we've got Drizzt's nature that we already can see coming out, and then depending on how it's nurtured is going to be whether it's going to continue to grow and bloom or whether it's going to wither and die. So for Vierna, Drizzt did pull out a softer side to her. Like actually when she started taking care of him and getting his personality, that was that glint of pride and that, you know, feeling of like wanting to always, you know, succeed, his relentlessness, you know, pulled out this little bit of a softer side to her. She liked it when he smiled and was happy about things. She didn't really just jump to wanting to like beat things into him like Briza was. And she was his first caretaker. First person who was looking after him, first person who was influencing him and teaching him. So she recognizes his potential. And she pushes him actually farther and sooner than she would have other Dro kids because she recognized that potential. So she actually was someone who originally believed in him and believed him to be better and superior to other kids his age. So in that way, she had a very positive thought process towards Drizzt. She found herself even questioning Dro ways and Dro mentality when taking care of him because he didn't need to be beaten and destroyed, and she liked that he had this light to him, that he wasn't just, you know, out to kill her right back or to, you know, torture small animals. He genuinely has this brightness about him and this light and this happiness and that pride and that spark in his eyes. And she actually liked that and thought it was good. She liked the feeling it gave her when he smiled at her and had that cocky kind of look in his face. So when Briza came in and was like, oh, you should be whipping that boy, like he needs to be put in his place, like you should be handling it differently, she did kind of have that pushback. But then she got scared because she was questioning her whole mentality, her whole life in a way, and the life that her family lives, which kind of made it where it reverted her kind of a little bit farther back into them to try and compensate for questioning by whipping him in times that he didn't need to be whipped and things. So she kind of has a little bit of a two sides to her. The softer side that Drizzt pulled out of her, and then that harder side that she felt like she had to put on because she didn't want to lose the status that she was already building and didn't want to have anybody find out that she's questioning these elements of their life. So it ended up being where she was good, but not as good as, we would have liked her to be to treating him, but better than any other Drow caretaker or caregiver would have given to him. And even Drizzt recognized that she was kinder and softer to him than anybody else, females at least in his family, especially Briza, who is like really horrible. She's like just up there with Malice. Like they are two minds in the same way, even possibly more bloodthirsty than Malice. And she recognizes, Vierna, she recognized the differences in Drizzt. She recognized that he's a softer soul, that he's not malicious, that he's not wanting to just rise up the ranks immediately, that he's not bloodthirsty. So her and Zach do have like that little bit of a conversation about how she can also sense that he's not quite the same as the other Drow children. So she was an important factor for him in these first 10 years, I believe it was, 10 years of taking care of him. And she was definitely a different choice than Briza would have been, and possibly maybe nurtured a little bit of his already set values at that young age of being different than the other Drow. So she did not just whip it out of him. She did whip him and did, especially like instill some of the hatred that they have into him. But she did not get rid of that spark, and nor did she really want to fully get rid of that spark in him. And then he moves on to Zach when he is 16. So Zach is Drizzt's dad, which Drizzt doesn't know, but Zach knows. And Zach, as we have learned a little bit more about him, we have really discovered that yes, he is different than most Drow. He is more Drow than Drizzt is at the moment, and that has helped him be a little bit more blending in. I wouldn't really totally say blending in, but it kind of is what I'm trying to get at, is that he is not so obvious about how he is not bloodthirsty and all that kind of stuff. Malice knows about it, and she tolerates it because it is only a marginal amount of difference. It's not like as much as Drizzt, obviously. He has slowly like formed back into being a little bit more Drow based on his experiences. But he already had those values and that more of that nature that was softer than the Drow and wanting the world to be better than the Drow make it. And he has obviously passed that on to his son. And we can then understand, like, okay, this nature has come from Zach for how Drizzt has originally maybe possibly come to these, to have this naturally have this personality, is probably from Zach. So that connection is very important to understand where Drizzt's nature came from. We don't know where Zach's came from. Maybe his was just an anomaly. Maybe it was just that he sees what was around him and doesn't like it. And obviously Drizzt feels the same way, but we can also see that that's a connection that he has with Zach, how they form their friendship around that because they both have more of that similar personality, and the relation does really help give a little bit of perspective of where that might have come from for Drizzt. And they do have this mentor and trainee kind of friendship Maybe a little bit of a father-son kind of dynamic, even though Drizzt doesn't know that Zach is his dad. They do have that bond between them. Especially as he's teaching him the weapons and fighting, and that's something that they really connect with and bond with, that has really strengthened that friendship, is that the teaching and the similar personalities, as well as that common ground that they have of being really interested in weapons and the teaching of that. So they are very similar in a lot of ways. Obviously, we've already covered that a little bit. Sorry guys, had something in my ear. But they also just share this kinder side to them that leads them to have a lot of laughter, a lot of smiling, a lot of playfulness when they're by themselves, which has then started to nurture Drizzt's personality, in my opinion. I feel like Zach is trying so hard to put Drizzt in a bubble to where he can hopefully instill those thoughts in him, so much so for as long as possible, that then when he gets in contact with actual Drow society, hopefully that bubble and that personality won't pop. We already have that moment where Zach's like, he has to be different. He has to be different than everybody. And he's really hoping and praying that Drizzt is actually going to come through to being not like all the other Drow. And we see that then he is now nurturing that and trying to help that blossom as much as he can. Obviously, when it comes to Malice, all bets are off. He has to do what's best to not be killed by Malice and not get Drizzt killed by Malice. That's why he just attacks him viciously in order to make it so he doesn't say anything to Malice, and to try and keep her eye off the fact that Drizzt doesn't act like a normal Drow, or doesn't have that same inferiorness instilled in him to women and to say the proper things. That doesn't mean that Zach is not strict. He is still strict. He is still having those rules of like, hey, you can't go in here, you can't go in here into my private space, and to be a little bit more, like, his punishment's going to be a little bit more than the average person. He still has that connection to the Drow society and that stuff that's bled into him, where he just can't help but be aligned with it and to go through with things. So he's trying to balance and trying to nurture mostly the softer side of himself to Drizzt, and to continue that learning for him and that continue to strengthen that position. But Zach still has that hardness to him, that Drow essence that he cannot overcome because he has to be in Drow society. So I do think it's very interesting to see this kind of balance in Zach, and to see like how sometimes Drizzt gets really confused by him, but most of the time they have this really good relationship, this really good friendship. So we see again this kind of nature-nurture kind of setup here, where we're seeing his nature and we're seeing how it's being nurtured. And how it's different than all the other Drow. And so we're really setting up again the background for Drizzt's personality, and possibly how he will interact in the future, based on who is teaching him and who is giving him care at this point in his early years. We also are getting a chance to see who Vierna is and who Zach is, and maybe, possibly, how that will affect things in the future too. Because with them being a little bit softer and them doing this more on the outskirts of Drow society, we're going to see if then later that will get either them in trouble, if that will happen where something happens that they're going to join Drizzt and be on a different team of some sorts. It depends on where our plot is going. But it could mean that these two people will then be on Drizzt's side if he needs it in situations that would normally call for more malicious actions. So we're setting us up to have kind of allies for Drizzt, and possibly will change what might happen in the future if these people come to a situation with Drizzt. If that makes sense. Please let me know if I'm not being as clear as I'm hoping to be on that point. But let me know what you think about the nature versus nurture here. Obviously, we'll continue to learn a little bit more about that as he goes to academy. But I'd love to know what if you think of this young age and how his nature and nurture and how his experiences at this point have played out, and if you think that things will come, or if you're thinking he's gonna be solid and stand against the Drow Society. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Now, last but not least, let's go ahead and talk about Alton DeVir. Because Alton's storyline has become a lot more complicated, and we keep focusing on it. So obviously, if we keep going back to it, it's important. I mean, it already seemed important in the fact that what was supposed to happen did not go as planned, and Alton did not die. But we are still seeing him, we're still having new developments with him, so he's obviously an important part of this story and might throw a wrench into things when we least expect it. So he managed to pass himself off as the faceless one for almost 20 years by the time that he is discovered officially. Obviously, Mazaj already knew about him, but nobody in the academy questioned him. None of his students questioned him, We didn't have anybody really thinking oh, he's acting weird now or something like that. So he did pass himself off as the faceless one for 20 years, which is commendable. And sure, he's not seeming like the smartest person, and the fact that he's almost gotten himself killed a couple times since then. But he is very motivated to have his vengeance. He now has the answers to the house that killed his house. So he knows it's Do Erden as the house that completely wiped out House DeVir. So that's now going to possibly throw a wrench into things. Because right now, all he's doing, his whole entire existence at this point, is to focus on revenge. To get revenge for those that were killed. His family. That's all he really is living for. That's all he wants. He doesn't even, at the point when he almost killed himself and Mazaj walked off and stuff like that, he was like, what do I even live for now? I really don't have any reason to live. But then he went back and gripped onto that vengeance. So that's really his only reason for wanting to live at this point. So it's a very big thing. And now he has that answer. So the question is, how is that going to then progress as well? He now is also part of House Hunnet. Because he passed himself off so well, the matron indoctrinated him into House Hunnet under the guise of Gelrus. Of course, she's like, okay, I can expose him at any time and get rid of him. But at this point, she is keeping him in the house and is going to use him as a tool. Sorry, guys, I felt like I was going to sneeze, and I still feel like I'm going to sneeze, but maybe not. And he's not allowed to act as against Do Erden. He's not allowed to do anything, even though now he has the information he wants. He's not allowed to do anything, and now he has to follow House Hunnet. So it's pretty interesting because his whole portion for living at this point has been to get revenge for the family that he no longer has. And now he is a part of a new family. He has now found himself a way to move forward with other people being connected to him and having a resource. So the question is, will his motivations change, or will he still be on the path for revenge? His plotline in general has just gotten so much more complex from just this one move even. Obviously complex because he knows the answers that he's looking for. Complex because he's now part of another house. Complex because obviously there's going to be plans for him to be doing things for House Hunnet that we don't know yet. So lots of different reasons that Alton is now becoming more and more prominent, and it's going to be more important for us to keep an eye on him and see where he is going for this story. So I just wanted to touch on him. I know that was actually a pretty quick topic, but I felt like he really needed a mention. I didn't really talk much about his personality, and that's because I think it's super interesting that this character we've really dived into a little bit. We have a background for him. We've gotten this whole book so far has had mentions of him and like his place, and we've got like stuff going on. And yet we don't really know a lot about him as a person. Like I don't really feel like I can say like other than obsessed with vengeance, I don't really feel like he has much of a personality, and his personality is the vengeance. And being a little bit of a weakling, and the fact that he, doesn't want to die. Like, literally, also his motivation at first was to not die and to be able to keep living. And now it's just the vengeance is pushing him forward, while him being kind of just scared of, like, getting discovered. And then he thought, okay, am I going to be dying now because I was discovered? So he's really kind of a wimp when it comes to like thinking he's gonna die, and he's obsessed with vengeance. Those are the two defining factors of Alton DeVir, in my opinion, at this point. So his storyline is important right now, but I feel like he is a little bit underdeveloped at this point for us to have more of a discussion about him personally. But we'll see as things progress how that changes, and if that feeling of him getting more of a personality moves forward or not. What do you think of Alton DeVir? Do you think he has a personality? Do you think he's just kind of a person that we know and are interested in what he's doing, but we don't really feel like we know much about him? Or do you have more that you think I am missing that I should think about, and that point to more of a personality for him and more depth? I'd really love to know and stuff, and to feel what you feel when you experience this book and these chapters. Okay, so last but not least is the nitty gritty. So 3 nitty gritty points. The first one is, how will that first kill change Drizzt? So that I feel like is the biggest thing that we're carrying forward from this set of chapters to the next set of chapters, is to understand fully what it means to have had that first kill and how that's going to change him as a person and his viewpoints. Because at first, when he first has it happen to him, probably because he's like in shock, or he's like not like digesting it yet, but he seems like he's okay. He seems like he doesn't really, it's more like he's just like doesn't understand why it happened in the first place. Like what is kind of like in his brain. But as it sinks in, and as he then has to take actions and use that as, something he has to be scared of moving forward, or something that he will call upon moving forward, is that going to change his personality? And is he going to be very, how upset is he going to be about this situation when we get to talk with him again and get to see what he's doing? We know that Zach mentioned that he was kind of bent out of shape about it, but we didn't really see it. So how are we going to see this change in him in the future? And then another question that we're going to be moving forward with is, what's going to happen when he goes to the academy? Mazaj obviously has that mission in order to get close to him, so that way they can kind of set themselves into a place of power against House Do'Urden. But also academy life with all these Dro that are bloodthirsty and, nasty people who don't really care about anybody else but themselves and gaining through the ranks and such. What is this going to do for Drizzt when he is now immersed in Dro culture? Like before, we've had Zach and Vierna, who are softer sides of Dro culture. Now he's going to be having like Dro culture to the max, and it's going to be all around him, surrounding him. And is he going to be able to remain this strong-hearted, good person who doesn't believe in these Dro aspects and these Dro beliefs? Will that affect him? Will we see a big change in him in our next set of chapters? We're really going to have to find out. And last but not least, I just kind of was thinking, I wonder what's going to happen to Zach when Drizzt is not there anymore. Because right now, Zach needs Drizzt because he really sees him as a lifeline of somebody who's not just murderous and horrible. And they have this good dynamic. And when he goes to the academy, Zach's going to be by himself, once again surrounded by people who are very drow and very malicious and very self-serving. So we see that almost he's like pleading for him not to go to academy right away, but almost for Drizzt. Well, it is for Drizzt for sure. But also a little bit for himself because he's like, I don't know how I can handle him not being around and not knowing if he's going to be drowning and changing, and what do I then do also, because now I have nobody to cling to anymore either. So Drizzt has been kind of his lifeline lately to his own sanity. What will happen once that sanity link is gone? Okay, well, that is what I had for this set of chapters. Please, like I said, as always, let me know if you think anything I didn't discuss but should have discussed. If there's anything that you have questions on, that you want me to elaborate a little bit more or maybe explain a little better, please let me know. I'd love to hear from you and to hear your own thoughts. I feel like I'm just tripping over myself all day today. I'm so sorry. But I'd love to hear your own thoughts about this set of chapters and what's happening so far, and these characters as well. Please let me know what you think of these characters. But before we go ahead and wrap up, let's go ahead and do the trivia question. Thank you to everybody who participated, as always. I appreciate everybody who does their best guess, answers the question, and takes a look and plays with me. I have a great time with you guys. So this week's question was, how many dwarves travel with Bilbo in The Hobbit? And the correct answer is 13. So congratulations to Stephen, Tasseloff, and Christian. Which one of you fed Dopey to the cave? I'm not sure what this is a reference to. Usually I get Christian's extra portion to the to his name that he adds in there, but this one I'm not sure about. So Christian, if you're watching, please let me know what does feeding Dopey to the cave mean? I'm not sure. But yes, there's 13. So congratulations to the three of you. You guys got it correct. I appreciate you guys playing with me. And if you would like to go ahead and play the trivia question as well and try your best guesses, go over to the blog, fantasyfictionfanatics.net. It is going to be on the right-hand side. If you are on the desktop, you'll scroll down just a little bit. On that right-hand side, you'll be able to answer the question there. If you're on mobile, you'll have to scroll almost all the way down to the bottom, but you will find it at the end there, and we'll be able to answer the questions. So thanks again to everyone who participates, and I hope I will see more answers from you guys in the future. All right. Let's go ahead and wrap up then. I guess that is it for today. So if you'd like to reach me, and down below is not the best place, totally understandable, though I would love to hear from you down there. You can also reach me on social media. We have a Twitter at fantasyfiction1. You can go ahead and follow me. You can DM me there. You can get updates and other things from me. Same thing with Facebook, which is /fantasyfiction1. You can follow me, get updates, and DM me there as well. And you can also go now to Instagram. That is a new Instagram, so I don't have too much up over there yet, but I am slowly working my way into learning how Instagram works and posting some posts, so hopefully you will enjoy what I put up there. I'd love to have you follow me, and that is also at fantasyfiction1. So no matter where you go, it's going to be the same thing for you to be able to easily find me. The best place, though, if you don't want to do the social media route and you want to do a little bit more personal, is the Discord, because I have several other fantasy fiction fanatics over there chatting in the Discord, and we are all having a good time talking about fantasy and non-fantasy related topics. I do also post updates there, I do announcements, and I also am available for DMs. So it's kind of an all-around good place if you would like to be in the community and chat with your fellow fanatics about different fantasy things and different things in life in general. So we already have lots of people over there. It is a growing Discord, and we'd love to have you. The link for that will be down below, so you can go ahead and join right away if that is of interest to you. Okay, I think that is everything for today. So I guess I will see you guys in the next class. And I hope you guys are having wonderful fantasy adventures. Bye.